Today's date is November 28, 2017. My title, Writing Before Adam. Alright, so I'm looking at this again with the writing because it is really a problem, and the more I'm looking into these issues dealing with writing when the Bible was written, the so-called original language of the earth being Hebrew and the language of the Hebrews being Hebrew, all this seems to me to be just like mumbo jumbo, just garbled up kind of stuff that's out there, and it's out there for different reasons. Some of it is out there because people just don't know better and just live with it, like I did myself and didn't take the time to study it. I was reading the Bible from as a small child. I never cared to look into it until now. Some of it's out there, in large part and mainly because people are just trying to throw off other people. It's coming to me more and more that religion is anti-religious. The very thing that is telling you that it is pointing you to God or to the Creator is the very thing that is not doing that. You have to find the Creator from your heart. Right? That's how you do it, because it doesn't matter how many books are out there that you can manage to read and how many people you can learn from. In the end, it's your heart that goes on a journey, an odyssey, where you are just searching for the Creator. Because the more you read, you realize that it's a lot of garbage you're getting. And I'm going to show some of this garbage again with some more information. So I'm going to touch briefly here on writing being there before Adam, which was a shock to me, from late last year when I came to that understanding. Because once I left the Christian church, I just took everything that Hebrew teachers are saying, because I'm just like, whoa, man, this sounds really good. Yeah, the answer is in the Old Testament and so on. Only to realize that the Old Testament doesn't have proper answers a lot of times. And then, it's just kind of crazy. But look at this now. I've got here something I'm going to read from the Bible Timeline by Thomas Robinson. This Bible Timeline book that I've had for, I don't know, a long time now, from I was in the Christian church, maybe 1995 or so I've had this for. So we're talking about 22 years now I've had this book. Still in good condition. For the first time, I'm only just starting to ask some better, more intelligent questions that people who studied the Bible, well, I shouldn't even say study, because most of us don't study it. Only a few study, compared to the amount of people who just listen to other people, and compared to the amount of people who just read their Bible. Because you see, reading your Bible, that doesn't get you to study. Most people reading the Bible are just approaching the Bible and spirituality from the point of view of just trying to be saved because they're scared of God for some reason, scared of going to hell, losing their soul, stuff like that. Most people are just trying to be religious when they read the Bible. But you need to go past that point. So in this timeline, I'm looking at some dating here. And I decided now, because I always just go in and just look at the dates you're giving for when this and that event happened in the scriptures. But I decided to read the kind of introduction to the whole book, the Bible Timeline. And hear what it says. Counting back to Eden. Since ancient times, people have used the first chapters of Genesis to try to discover dates for the creation of the world and the early generations of humanity. Now, first of all, and I didn't even see this a few minutes ago when I decided to read from this book. And I have other Bible timelines here, and they're giving some different dates as well. So you can imagine how frustrating this is just to try to find God. But it just said, since ancient times, people have used the first chapters of Genesis to try to discover dates for the creation of the world and the early generations of humanity. You know, if this Adam was just a single man and not a whole group or nation of people, then I'm sure he wasn't using Genesis. So ancient times right here would have to mean probably still ancient times like long ago, but certainly not as far back as. So then, whether it's Adam or let's say if it is also a lot of people that came out of Adam, like a whole nation of people, if that's what male and female created he, them, and called their names Adam, if that's what it means, a group of people, then since those ancient times, people were not using the early chapters of Genesis to figure out the dates for creation, because there was no Genesis at that point yet, wasn't written yet. So people were able to think of the date of creation in other time periods without the book of Genesis, without a book, as far as I'm seeing so far. Without a book. This also means to me that people were pleasing the Creator without a book. They didn't have no laws written in scrolls that they were going to say, and Enoch walked with God and he was not, for God took him. How did this man please the Most High without a book of instructions that you and I feel we cannot live without? All these other people who wrote the first scrolls that we like to talk about, like let's say, Enoch and the earliest patriarchs and so on, and Noah and so on. How did these people please the Most High before they had some written laws in a book to go by to know how to please Him? And to know, how to go by the sun and to watch the moon for this and whatever. If they didn't have these written instructions in a book, how did they know how to please God? How come they were pleasing unto Him before this Torah was written? How? Noah went into the ark with 8 people and he was perfect in his generations. How is that going to happen? He was so righteous that the Most High chose him and he found grace to be chosen. How did he manage to live like that before he had the Torah written to be reading it every day to tell him how to live before the Creator on the earth? How is it possible that all the people on the earth, except the 8 of them, and it seems like Noah was the one really credited with the righteousness and they just got it because somehow they were under him, like in his family. But how did just these 8 people figure out in an entire world how the Creator should be pleased, so that the Torah is saying those 8 got saved? When, as far as I can see, since people left the garden, and actually in the garden itself, it seemed difficult to please the Creator without some book to let you know how to walk the line. Because if they didn't have a book in the Garden of Eden, then it shows you that without a book they could not please Him. Because as these guys are going to show as I continue to read, it seemed, according to their views, Adam lived and Eve lived just about 1 year in the garden before they were expelled. This is very difficult for me trying to qualify this Torah. Now let's go on reading. The first 11 chapters of Genesis provide a continuous list of patriarchs from Adam to Abraham that seems to give all the information needed for exact dating. But many who have studied these dates have confronted major uncertainties. Really? From the Torah that was untainted and untouched in the Hebrew, the holy first language of the earth given by God? The Torah has not been tampered with or changed, anything done to it. But many people have been confronted with major uncertainties about what they find in it. How can a sure book of God written in the original language be causing such uncertainties among different people? Because if it has not been changed and you are unsure and you are unsure and you over there are unsure and then I come in the picture and I'm unsure as well, it's simple. Just look at the sure book that we still have. Okay, we found the scrolls that confirm the scriptures, Dead Sea Scrolls. Why are people still filled with such uncertainty? It's simple. Just go and read from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And what is written there will be sure because it was preserved, they tell us, and it's correct. But it seems what was preserved by God, like many people teach, is unable to give factual information, correct information in a way that does not leave people confused. So the only sure word of God, the copies of the scrolls that were preserved and were not changed for a couple thousand years because they were buried in the earth in clay potteries and so on. These things are preserved, but we still can't settle these basic things as found in just the first couple chapters of Genesis. We're not even talking about later on in the book yet. As will be apparent in the Bible timeline, that's this book I'm reading from, in the period before the birth of Abraham, about 1995 BC, biblical chronology and non-biblical chronology seem to run on separate tracks. In the timeline, the biblical dates before 2000 BC represent, in a simple manner, the information in the genealogies of Genesis chapter 1 to chapter 11 in the traditional Hebrew Bible and almost all English translations. These genealogies list the marvelously long lives of the first 20 generations of biblical patriarchs, 10 before the Great Flood and 10 after. And you see, sometimes when I see stuff like that, such nice rounded numbers, 20 of them, and conveniently 10 falls before the flood, and the flood is like this demarcation point, and the other 10 comes just fit neatly right after it. I'm not saying there couldn't have been 20 and 10 fit here and 10 fit there so that there's some kind of a sandwiching kind of thing going on. But sometimes it just makes you wonder how everything just seems to flow perfect and nice in the book that we call the Torah, yet they're saying that people are being confused by it, and it results in uncertainties. I mean, why didn't it just happen to be the first 21 generations or something like that? This nice 20 and 10 there and 10 after the flood. Anyway, let's go on. They also give the age at which each fathered the son who succeeded him and the age at which he died. The list accounts for 1946 years before the birth of Abraham, and thus would place the creation of Adam in about 3941 BC. Now here again the problem. They're giving the dates and years and so on for the births of each person and can tell you just how long these people lived for. But you told me as well throughout the years, from these different authors that I've read from and whoever was teaching and so on, that Moses got the Torah from God and he was up on Mount Sinai and he gave him, and there's just this big miraculous dropping of information in this man's mind, so strong that he came down shining in his face from the mountain. Now you're telling me that Moses came down from the mountain with all this information dropped in him from the Most High, and he remembers all the law details that he must give of all these some 613 laws. But he also, and he doesn't seem to struggle with remembering them, even though people were stressing him out to the point where the Most High told him at one point, look, go home and deal with your family. Set up some people to help you manage stuff. Go home and deal with your family. So stress. Now, you and I know that when you deal with psychology and you're dealing with family systems and family life and pressures in life and your job and so on, this man is running from the Pharaoh. He's got a couple million people dealing with who are tugging on him everywhere. Some are like, look, we're going to die if we stay here. Let's go back to Egypt. We need some water. We need some food. All kinds of stuff tugging on the man. The man is running an empire, might I say, in the wilderness at that certain point. He's got all these things that he's dealing with. Right? And he's dealing with his own broken life, having killed a man and he fled, his life broke up, and he is taking, about 40 years having fled from Egypt to kind of get over and deal with that whole situation of a life that has been derailed from Egypt, and adjusting to things, this wife and that wife and whatever, all kinds of stuff that's going on in this man's life. And he remembers all 613 laws given to him in just one shot on the mountain, in this one episode or one revelation period up on the mountain. And he also remembers all the dates from God, even a date like 1946 BC, this person lived and so on, and they lived for this exact amount of years and so on. You're telling me Moses remembered even the very dates for when each person was born before he was alive. God told him all of that. And he remembered it all to write it down and never slipped with remembering one of the 613 laws while balancing that with remembering all these specific dates. Sometimes he gets more specific in the Torah, to not only mentioning that it was 1946 or 2247 or whatever, but in the year, in the seventh month, the third day of this, he remembers actual days in particular months and which month of the year that was, and blah, 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 in the life of this and that person. This man has some kind of a super mind because God gave him all the Torah miraculously, supernaturally in one shot up on a mountain. I mean, why is it difficult for people to think that maybe Moses could jot down all these specific dates because other people before him had told about these things and written them down and so on, and he used the records to then copy them over into a nicely put together writing called the Torah, and said so on and so forth, right? Enoch said this, Enoch said that, Enoch gave this date, this one gave that date, Adam said this date was that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he just gave all this stuff, and this was confirmed by Seth and whatever, and this date was given here by whatever, and this is when Abel died, this particular day, and so on. Moses doesn't seem to get all that information from these other people who lived before him, from the specific dates when things happened in their lives when he was not alive. God bypasses all these people's record keeping to go and give Moses all of the information. Why? To ensure that it came to Moses untainted and proper, yet we have the proper stuff and people are still running into confusion and uncertainties with it. How does that make God look? That he bypassed the record keeping of all the other people who, as you know, humans are going to keep records in some kind of way. That's why you find ancient inscriptions and so on. He bypasses all of that to give Moses the stuff. And it still leads to confusion. So what did the creator secure by doing it in that way? As opposed to just telling them, look, learn from your fathers before you and write down their history in one book. Let me go on reading. Differing chronologies. A comparison of this date with widely accepted non-biblical chronologies reveals how the divergence is. Archaeologists, for example, confidently date the ruins of a tower in the famous town of Jericho to at least 7000 BC. If biblical and non-biblical chronologies were merged, that would date the tower more than 3,000 years before Adam, something I've talked about before. Those who have analyzed the biblical chronology over several observations and explanations for the divergence offer several observations and explanations for the divergence. They note, for example, that in ancient times, many different systems of dating were used among various nations. Now that right there seems kind of strange because if you're writing the Torah, it don't really matter what other nations are, how other nations are dating stuff that they heard about. Because if stuff is happening with the line of Shem, which seems to me kind of strange the more I study the scriptures now, if other nations are dating stuff that they heard, then they're dating it, and yeah, we'll still read of their records and so on. But the people who are the Most High is dealing with, they should have it correct. They should, and it should just be flaws. But what we find is that the Torah itself is not flawless. It really is not. And I'm tired of just acting like I gotta just say everything because I gotta be. You see, many of us are talking about I'm Israelite, and don't realize that we're just being religious in the way that people are religious in the other religions. Because we're not using enough common sense. If the Torah says it, we must believe that it is so, even if it doesn't meet common sense. And I have yet to hear the person who has this knowledge tell me that black people gave themselves the Torah in modern times. Now, if we gave it in ancient times because we're the Hebrews, okay, all right, I can accept that right here for argument's sake. Because based on all we said, blah, 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 blah. But in modern times, we got it from white people. They own the publishing companies. We came off slave ships and then they thrust the stuff in our hands and said, hey, here's a Bible. And then they try to put it our eyes if we try to read it. So you understand now that if somebody is giving us the Torah and punishing us for trying to read it, even though they took it away from us in ancient times, that the Romans confiscated the Torah from us and whatever, and we had to hide it, their scenes hid the Dead Sea Scrolls and whatever when they were running for their lives and so on. So obviously somebody was hiding stuff and took it away from us, confiscated our writings, the writings of the Hebrews. And nearly 1500 years later or something like that, they gave it back to us. You don't think they would have done something to it in all that time? They took it from you because it was dangerous. And later on they said, we're just going to give it back to them the same way because it is not dangerous now. So let's go on now. They know, for example, many various nations, they also observe that even in very ancient times, there were wide disagreements about the numbers in Genesis chapter 1 to chapter 11. So when they tell you numbers like this person was born on this date and that date and so on, and he lived so long and blah, 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 there were wide disagreements even in ancient times. So if in ancient times there were wide disagreements, it was not settled. So how come you are so sure today in 2017? And who could have caused this disagreement in ancient times? Because we go back to ancient times to find truth, but we find in ancient times they couldn't agree on what truth was. But we are supposed to be sure right now in 21st century? The three most ancient versions of Genesis provide differing ages for many of the patriarchs. You see that? Different ages for the patriarchs. As noted, the Hebrew text of Genesis would date the creation 1,946 years before the birth of Abraham. So, creation happened 1946 years before Abraham was born. The ancient version of Genesis preserved among the Samaritans, as in the Samaritan Pentateuch, reckons 2,247 years before Abraham, so that's around about 300 years difference. The Greek translation of the Bible, made in the 2nd century BC, the Septuagint, dates the creation 3,312 years before Abraham, a whopping 1,366 years earlier than the date set by the Hebrew text. A simple biblical chronology, therefore, depends on which ancient text one follows. Depends on which one. So then truth in its purity is going to depend on which book you choose. And as we see, most people are going to just write and teach based on which one they like. Not which one is true, but which one they favor. The early Christian church, using the Septuagint, dated the creation at about 5,500 BC. So I'm not going to follow that one because it's coming from the Christian church, the early Christian church. Judaism, however, since the 15th century has counted 3761 BC as the date of creation. And I'm not going to go with that one because it's since the 15th century. They seem to have come up with this, so that's way too late. That's coming closer to our time here as opposed to being closer to creation itself. So if they're deciding this in the 15th century, that doesn't seem comfortable to me. The famous date of 4004 BC for creation is based on the sum of the ages of all the patriarchs. So, okay, looks like this other person now, whoever was the group that was doing this, they were trying to go by some averages. So, okay, this person or these people were trying something different. So, give them a little plus for trying to approach it from a different way, but it still doesn't really help us, so I can't go by that either. So, after all this, I'm still left not knowing that I can be certain about these dates in the Torah. So I find at least one thing for certain. In 2017, I've not found one person teaching the Torah in truth who can tell me that all the Torah is true that we have, because they cannot prove to me that the dates are correct. That means you have not verified the Torah, even if you are skilled in the Hebrew and skilled in the history of the ancient world. You have no way to verify the history of the ancient world because you cannot verify the dating given in the book that you say was given by God. So the Torah cannot be verified completely. Should I repeat that part for you again? You say the Torah is the truth from God. Now, I'm not going to take that from you, but I'm just saying, just slow down a little bit. The Torah cannot be properly or completely verified. And just add to that the many, many different lessons that we can all teach if every one of us decide to pick any one chapter and teach on that from the Torah. We'll all come out saying different things. So people are proving, the Torah, it's untainted, it's untouched, this is just given from God, just the way it is, and no changes happen. But obviously the dates are a problem. Now, if God appears to you and tells you something, you're going to say it is true because God is telling you. Well, if God gave the Torah and it has not been changed, how come we're not sure of the things in it as far as the dating is concerned? You're going to be sure of the laws and so on, and that Israel kept this law and that law and so on. You're going to say you're sure of that, but you can't be sure of the dates. But hang tight, because I'm going to pull, not in this lesson, of course, it's later on down the road, I'm going to pull the rug from out under the Abrahamic religions that use this Torah. And they're going to curse me and tell me I'm anti-God, I'm anti-whatever, blah, 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 and you want to stone me and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to challenge this Torah in ways I never dreamed I would. Not because I want to do away with it, because I've told you many times in different videos I'm searching, but I cannot tolerate stupid arguments anymore. Why? Because I left the Christian church and found liars as well, and that is my main beef. I should probably start changing that because I don't eat meat anymore anyway. So there goes your lying Torah that's telling me that God told you to chop up animals and eat the meat from it to offer and sacrifice unto him. It's complete garbage with that point right there. It's ridiculous. He made the animals to flourish and then tells you to try to wipe them out by killing them. He put so much effort into saying, look, save them by twos and sevens into the ark. And then come off the ark and tell you to start slaughtering them. It just does not make any sense. In time, I'm probably just going to eventually find some different listeners surfacing, because I'm not sure the people who started listening to me at first, and I'm thankful that you've listened to me all this time, I'm not sure that you will be able to tolerate where I'm going. Because after another 5 years, I mean, I don't know how you're going to manage listening to me. Because I'm not going to read this Bible like it's just another religious thing to do. I'm sick of the religion in the earth. It is what is used to snare people's minds, bring you in a trap. Now, is there some real instructions from the Creator? Of course, I believe that. But let's try to prove what's there instead of just approaching it like just another religion on earth. You're saying you're not into Judaism, but all I hear you talking about is what's in Judaism. But then he said, no. They stole the stuff from us and they're using it. Okay, I can give you that argument because that seems to make sense. But even that takes more looking into as well. Differing interpretations. Interpreters also differ widely concerning the factuality of the early genealogies of Genesis. Some consider, so if they're interpreters now, they're not just necessarily secular archaeologists, if I want to use that term here, but by interpreters now, it means that these kind of people seem to be, like they have some affinity toward the text in terms of probably approaching it for some spiritual use, spiritual benefit, or at least paying more keen attention to understanding the text. That's why they're called interpreters. But they differ widely among themselves, right? Concerning the early genealogies of Genesis. Some consider the genealogies entirely legendary and cite as evidence the vast lifespans of the early patriarchs. Listen to this part coming now. Often reaching more than 900 years, which seems incredible to me. Others accept the lists as factual but incomplete. These interpreters theorize that great gaps of time passed between the patriarchs named in the genealogies, and thus they are able to accommodate some of the vast geological history of the earth. Still, others take the genealogies and their chronology as completely factual, and that seems to me like the religious ones, and argue that God actually created the earth only a few thousand years ago. Now, what that seems in part to be saying to me is that it seems like it would make more sense that the vast lifespans of the people in the early parts of Genesis and just the way the whole thing seems and the different things that people are finding out about the age of the earth and so on, it seems that a lot more time is actually there between the different people in the early parts of Genesis. So then, instead of saying one person lived here and the next person was born 2 years after he died, it would more seem that there was a longer time span separating some of these people, but not necessarily all. So more things happened on the earth and there was more time that passed, which would then make it go longer than 5,000 or 6,000 years that we've been here. So more time has passed. But the Torah is instead telling us that this person and that person, their lifetimes overlapped and so on, and they met each other, knew each other all the time. This happened and so on. And there was only probably a couple years between each of some other ones and so on. It seems like they're saying here that much more time happened, but these figures were placed in the scriptures as though they lived together and overlapped each other's lives. So by doing that, they are robbing us of knowing about some more time that had happened on the earth. That seems to me what they're trying to hint at. So it's going to take a lot more studying to try to look into this stuff, but with other things that people are finding out, it's getting hard to try to lock down 5,000 or 6,000 years as when Adam started. 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. Still others, the Bible timeline leaves the choice, which is this book, of any particular interpretation open to you, the reader. That means after all their expert knowledge and the many experts that they have been in touch with over the years before writing this book, in the end, how you interpret it is just up to you. So you're telling me God allowed the Torah to be saved in some clay jars by the Essenes, untouched, to prove to you that the Bible we have now in modern times was always true. But in the end, when you find the true confirmation, it's just up to you what you think. Well, then what was proved by the Dead Sea Scrolls being found? Nothing enough. All that proves is that the version we had is the same as the version found that's called the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's all it proves. It doesn't prove that the whole thing is true, that this copy from the modern world is, like, you see what I'm trying to get at? All that says is that we had the same copy all along that the Dead Sea Scrolls had. It doesn't prove that this is what the Hebrews wrote in just the same manner originally from the first scroll was written. It does not prove that. And until you find the record of what Moses put and hid with the ark, how can you verify that what you got today is the exact kind? Because you never found that, so you can't verify that. Look here in Exodus 25:16. And thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee. Another version says, you are to put the testimony that I will give you into the ark. Put the tablets of the testimony that I will give you into the ark. So we can't find no ark. And then we cannot find the commandments that Moses placed inside of it. So how do we know that while we're singing the praises of the Dead Sea Scrolls, how do we know that it is the same as what Moses put in the ark on those tablets? We cannot be sure of that. If we have not found the ones in the ark, we do not know what is in the ark on those tablets. It is just impossible. But can you believe that it is the same? Yeah, because if you're reading the Torah, you're going to just believe whatever is written on the pages, because you don't want God to strike you as an unbeliever. Okay, to read a little bit more from this, care and accuracy throughout the Bible timeline, which is again this book I'm reading from. Each historical event is preceded by a date. These dates are based on careful study and research, but they must almost always be considered approximate and relative. Alright, so now basically they're telling you the dates that you use to deal with the Torah from all these books you're reading are just being handled the same ways, through careful study and research, and treat them as approximate and relative. So if they are approximate, then when I read the Torah, I'm going to now be looking at these dates as approximate as well, relative, just there to give me a more full-bodied story of what happened, but not that it happened at those particular times necessarily, because I don't know anyone yet who can prove when the earth was made or how long we've been on earth for when Adam was born or made. But according to this timeline, let's look at this now. 3941, Adam and Eve are placed in the Garden of Eden, as in Genesis 2:15. That's 3941 BC. Then in 3940, that's 1 year later, Adam and Eve are expelled from the Garden of Eden for eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam becomes a farmer, struggling to eke out a living in hard surroundings, as you see in Genesis chapter 3. And so he becomes a farmer. So run about 1 year they live in the garden. I don't know This whole serpent thing sounds very strange, because if the world was perfect at that time, even though they said Jericho was up and running before that, and people were making tools and all that before Adam was even created. But if they are such perfect beings and there's no sin on earth yet and so on, they are just so righteous, then when you are that powerful like an angel, don't you have more resistance to temptation, and it just so easily just eat just like that? 1 year? Now look at the problem with the time as well, the dating. Adam and Eve put in the garden 3941. In 1 year they are kicked out. And Adam, when he was made, had to name the animals. So if he's there, like, how long did he take to name the animals and get kicked out in 1 year? Genesis 2:15, and the Lord God took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So he put him in there, so that's in 3941 if we go by these dates. And then they're going to get expelled within 1 year if we go by these dates. So he's already in there. And a couple verses later now, the woman is made, and let me see now. No, he put him in there, and then he makes the woman later. But before he makes the woman, it seems, verse 19 says, and out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. So the woman wasn't even made yet. So, I mean, we're still working with a 1 year time period here. So in about 1 year, Adam names all these millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of creatures. Plus, within that same year, when he's naming all that stuff, like, if you got a lot of paperwork to do, and you got like a couple hundred papers to deal with on your desk, you might even try to come in to work, and on a day off and try to do some more, or stay back late and do some overtime, because it's a lot of work, right? But he's got millions of animals and so on to deal with, to name. In the middle of all that work, and he still has to tend the garden and so on, whatever that means, Eve comes into the picture. So now he's going to spend time with this woman. When does he find time to name all of the creatures, do all that, and spend time with this new woman that he's got to spend time with, get to know her and so on, all in 1 year? He names all that stuff, gets all that done in 1 year? I don't know, maybe I'm taking this thing too serious. Now, looking into this dating stuff and whatever, I don't know how to pronounce this word properly. It's an ancient writing system from Africa, but I'll try. I think it's called Nsibidi. That's how I'll pronounce it here. Nsibidi is an ancient Igbo alphabet and writing system indigenous to southeastern Nigeria. I jotted that down from what I was reading online. So, indigenous to southeastern Nigeria. Now, some people who have very good Igbo knowledge of the Igbo history, say Igbo dates back to the time of Sumer. So we're talking about them having this writing system, this African writing system, at least at the time of Sumer, and what comes to mind is the Tower of Babel and so on, and the tongue splitting and so on. So this is an ancient writing system. Now look at this, what I'm reading online here from, it's on my phone, so it's not showing it fully, but Atlanta Black something, but you can find it easily. because I think this was, let me see who wrote this. Oh no, I'm not seeing much now, like on my phone. Some things are kind of hard to read, but you can find the article if you just run the search for the title of the article: 11 Ancient African Writing Systems That Demolish the Myth That Black People Were Illiterate. Yeah, type that in with Atlanta Black Star. That's the name of the website. So, okay. So, I'm only going to read parts of this. So, they're saying Africa has the world's oldest and largest collection of ancient writing systems. The evidence dates to prehistoric times and can be found in multiple regions of the continent. So the evidence, they're saying, goes to prehistoric times. So when you're dealing with that now, what comes to mind is times before history was written down. So if you don't find much from Adam or before Adam to the time when they're saying Jericho was there like 3,000 years or more before Adam, you're talking about these kinds of times, I would imagine. So Africa had writing systems thousands of years before Adam and Eve. Who was doing all this writing before Adam? Who? They said they found evidence, but your Torah is your own evidence, so it can't be true. People gave you the Torah printed in a nice book after your people came off the slave trade, because you never met any ancient Israelite that had this particular Torah in the time of Isaiah and others and Moses. So the only more real connection you can make in closer to your time is coming off the slave ship and seeing people with this thing they call the Bible. Although there are copies of it before that, of course. But I'm saying, it's like it just seems way too kind of strange that you got this book coming out of slavery, and they're telling you that Hebrew was the original language of it and the original language of the Hebrews and so on. And this is when all this timing and dating stuff started and whatever with Adam, blah, blah, blah. And he was speaking the Hebrew in the Garden of Eden and so on. And apparently it seems Adam himself never wrote anything, but there were other Africans who were more well-developed than Adam who were writing in many different African scripts before Adam. But Adam was the one to hear directly from God, the Creator, and he never had the skill and the wisdom to write stuff, but Africans are writing stuff before him, and you tell me he was African as well. So Adam just looks out the window through the bushes of the garden and sees all these Africans writing and going on with technology, building things, carving things, writing, scribing things and so on, developing themselves in ways that today we would call becoming more technologically advanced. It shows that they are wise and skillful people. There's growth and so on and so forth. Having technology like farming, which Adam would later have to pick up once he's kicked out the garden, like they just said here, Adam became a farmer after he got kicked out. So Adam never cared about all that technology until he was kicked out. So the wise people outside the garden who were living before him and writing before him, speaking other languages that were not Hebrew apparently, they were so wise that they had a full-bodied system that Adam could get a job with one of their work systems when he got kicked out from the presence of God. Now, who was wiser? The people who were outside the garden who never heard from God, or Adam, the man who was made by God, who heard directly from God as God spoke to him and he heard the voice of God walking in the cool of the day? Who was wiser? Them or Adam? But the Torah is all right. The oldest Asian writing, Proto-Cuneiform, dates to around 3000 BC. Found clay texts found at Jemdet Nasser. However, the oldest known African writing systems are several centuries older. Here are 11 African writing systems you should know about to dispel the myth that Africans were illiterate people. And I'm not going to read all these 11, so let's look at it now. Proto-Saharan, and they're showing the little picture here, looks like some kind of cow or some animal with the inscriptions writing on it, their alphabets or cuneiform, whatever they want to call it. A rock engraving at the Oued Mertotech lower level. Proto-Saharan 5000 to 3000 BC. Dr. Clyde Winters, we've all heard of him, author of the Ancient Black Civilizations of Asia, wrote that before the rise of the Egyptians and Sumerians, there was a wonderful civilization in the fertile African Sahara where people developed perhaps the world's oldest known form of writing. These inscriptions of what some archaeologists and linguists have termed Proto-Saharan near the Karga oasis west of what was considered Nubia may date back as early as 5000 BC, before Adam was made. People were already writing. Egyptian writing. Perhaps the most famous writing system of the African continent is the ancient Egyptian or Kemetic hieroglyphs, which I guess means sacred writings. So this is writing from God or whoever they were calling God, but it seems like the Torah was there in Egypt in some form, because there's all this fighting over the Torah being there in Egypt, whether you say it was stolen from it or from Egypt or not, or Egypt took it from the Hebrews or not. That's not my point of contention here. I'm just saying that obviously it was there at some point. It more seems to me that these people who the Most High was dealing with were in Egypt probably earlier than we have been told. Anyway, there are different kinds of scripts. They said 3 kinds of scripts are known to the Egyptians that, people don't always know all of them. I've read this before, but I'm just going to mention this first one here. Hieroglyphic, 4000 BC to 600 AC. So this now has to deal with the Medineter, God's words. And it's funny too that here they're saying, okay, let me read it just as it's saying here. The ancient Egyptians called their hieroglyphic script Medineter, meaning God's words. The word hieroglyph comes from the Greek hieros, meaning sacred, and glypho, meaning inscriptions, and was first used by Clement of Alexandria circa 200 AD. So there again, basically, we're getting even the name of these writings and of their script and so on based on conquerors who went into Egypt. So we don't even know what the Egyptians themselves called their writings. And it looks like they didn't even call themselves Egyptians anyway. So who really were they? You see, that's something I'm digging into as well. And so far with my measly little knowledge of these histories, I'm uncovering some stuff that just doesn't let the conventional understanding make sense. But it takes more time for me to bring that out because I got to learn more to, whatever. Anyway, but at least though, hieroglyphic 4000 BC, at least 4000 BC, they're saying. So again, that's still a little bit before Adam was born. Was made. I keep saying born, like you understand what I mean, right? Well, if there were Africans outside his garden, then it seems that they were born, but he was made. Okay, let me move on some more now. So that's at least 2 writing systems so far that was there in Africa before Adam was born. Was made, gee. Okay, this is the one. I guess I'll just stop the article here with this one. The Insibidi, which I mentioned earlier, 5000 BC to present time. Nsibidi is an ancient script used to write various languages in West Central Africa, most notably used by the, I don't know how to pronounce these stuff properly, but used by the Uguakima and Ijagham Ekoi people of Nigeria and Cameroon. Nsibidi is also used by the nearby Ebe, Efik, Ibibio, Igbo, and Uyanga people. So these Nigerians now, they were using these scripts, and like this one here, Nsibidi, before Adam. So writing was there before Adam. They were writing these things before Adam. And this stuff was there before, at least, before Sumer then. So when you deal with now Proto-Canaanite and Proto-Sinaitic and Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, Paleo-Hebrew at the time of Moses and so on, it seems like there were already writings before that. So if Hebrews were writing stuff in the time of Moses, and they're saying, oh, see, it's ancient Hebrew, that's just at least what they were using at that time, but there was something else before that. And in some later video, when I get more knowledgeable on it, I'm going to show you as well that according to my belief and what I have found, Hebrew was not the language. Because when you deal with the script, that's just how it's writing. So you say, okay, well, it was Hebrew that they were speaking, but they just wrote it in one of these other scripts. Right? But no, it seems like they were speaking other languages before that. So the Hebrews would have been speaking something else before. And now if the Hebrews are Igbos or Nigerians, for example, as some will tell you, that means that they were speaking other languages that was there before Hebrew. So Hebrew would not have been the original tongue of earth or of Adam. And these Igbo languages were being spoken at or before the time of even Sumer, when the Tower of Babel tongue split happened, which means different tongues, different languages, and different scripts were in use before Babel split up people's languages. You see the problem here, why I started reading this? It's not because I don't want to believe in the Most High and stuff like that. I'm having trouble trying to qualify the text based on tongues being split for the first time, giving multiple languages at Sumer, at Babel, when they're finding that people were speaking many different languages before Sumer, before the Genesis account, before the Torah account. And then this smart Moses comes and writes all this history with just unmatched memory by anyone else on earth to remember all these thousands of years of information with specific dates. And he never makes a mistake because the Torah cannot be found to be wrong. The Nsibidi set of symbols is independent of Roman, Latin, or Arabic influence, and is believed by some scholars to date back to 5000 BC, but the oldest archaeological evidence ever found, monoliths in Ikom, Nigeria, dates it to 2000 BC. So, as you can see, some people say it was there, the Nsibidi, much earlier, up to 5000, some are saying now 2000, so on. But the Igbo history itself is telling you, which I'm going to make other videos with that their languages were there before even Adam. So, I mean, who knows really? When people give speeches or write books and so on, people usually want to know their sources so they can verify stuff. Let me just read my notes the way I wrote it here. Because Moses writing the Torah because he got it just from God like that, when other people had the history because they lived their own lives that he was writing about because he got it from God, because he never learned it from them. Look at this. We ask for sources from people today who claim things in their teachings and books. We want their sources to verify stuff. Nobody's trying to verify from Moses at the time because, well, Moses doesn't need to provide sources to the Egyptians, to the other Israelites who's hearing him say all these things and write in this Torah, and to later Hebrews. They're not trying to claim any sources, using the sources that Moses claimed, because, hey, I'm a Hebrew and I'm filled with integrity, so I don't really need sources from Moses to say where you got all this history from to write the Torah, because God gave him in a zap of lightning and inspiration on the mountain. So who needs sources when God gave him? I'm a Hebrew and I just believe that. I just accept that Moses got it just like that. But we, the rest of us, we usually want sources, but Moses doesn't have to provide sources. Why didn't Moses give us this information, the sources that he used to write the Torah, to verify what he said about Noah, Enoch, and Adam, for example? Would Adam be surprised today to hear people like us and Moses cussing out his woman, blaming her for talking to snakes and eating fruit of the forbidden, and pinning the fall of mankind on his woman and on him as well? When Moses and nobody checked with Adam, but that they're cussing out his woman saying she did it and you joined in and so on. How come Adam doesn't leave any records for us to verify? But Moses lives a long time later after Adam, and he doesn't need to provide any sources in the Torah to say, and this is the writing of Enoch, and this is the writing of Adam, and this is the writing of this and that one and so on, and Abraham and so on. He doesn't need to provide any sources. He just says, this is it. This is what happened. Take it from me. I heard from God. I was up on the mountain. And to make sure you know or believe that it is the truth, my head was shining like a light bulb when I came down. So everybody knows this is from God. Yet, in 2017, we are still arguing over the text, when the text was verified by God in some kind of way by giving a lightning and thundering and so on, and a shining man's face coming down from that mountain.